Matt, what's going on, man? How are you today? Greetings. Welcome in, everybody. A happy Thursday to you all here. A fun little show we've got for you here today. I'm going to attempt to put the story in question into the chat here. To sign into chat. I'm already signed in, you stupid streaming program. All right, I'll do it this way. I'll do it under my personal account. I'm going to go into the live chat. I'm going to drop in the link for the show for today. I don't think this worked the way I thought it was going to. But that is the link. I did drop it in there for the article that is the topic of conversation today here on the show. Woke up this morning, was perusing the internet, deciding between a couple different things of what we were going to talk about. And then I saw a great story that dropped on thedraftnetwork.com this morning from our guy, Dan Ollinger, who wrote a story about the NFL has only one foolproof team building strategy. And I thought that would be a fun topic of conversation for us to discuss here today. What's up, Bailey? Hello to Jamie. Welcome in, everybody. Hope everyone's having a great start to their Thursday. We'll get started here in just a second. Let everybody kind of file in. I'm all ready to go from my end. Tweets been sent out. Discord message has gone out. We are ready to go, but I want to give it a couple minutes. Let everybody kind of file in here who's going to be a part of the show here this morning. And then we can get started with this team building strategy conversation. Heldy just dropping the letter E in the chat. Have no idea what that is supposed to mean, but a good morning to you, Heldy. Happy you're here. Again, don't know what the E stands for, but we're happy that you are here to start the day here on a Thursday with us here at TDN Daily. So welcome in, everybody. Hope everyone's got their coffee, their tea, their beverage, whatever they've got for the show today. Now, Jamie's dropping E's in the chat. Does anybody want to fill me in on what this means here? Does anybody want to let me in on the bit here so I can play along, or is part of the bit that I don't know what the bit is, and that makes the bit funnier? Is that what I'm getting at here? Is that how this goes? Because I don't know what the E stands for, the bit's funnier. Yeah, E. Okay, yeah, they're okay, great. So now everyone's playing along. All right, we'll get this show on the road here. We'll transition into the big screen. Hello, everybody. A pleasant good Thursday morning to you. Jamie says, Chris, you are the bit. Okay, very, very well then. Very well done. Bits are only funny if they exclude Chris. I don't think that's true at all. I think there are plenty of bits that we've had in recent memory that include me. I now do remember this bit from Happy Hour a few months ago, in which E was just mentioned in the chat. I do remember this now. I've unplugged my headphones from the microphone, but I think it's okay because I don't necessarily need to hear anything. But a pleasant good morning to everybody here. Happy Thursday to you all. Fun one in store for you here today. We're going to talk about team building, a recent story over on thedraftnetwork.com from Dan Ollinger. NFL only has one foolproof team building strategy. It is going to be a fun little conversation that we're going to have here on the show today. So if you guys are ready, I'm ready. Again, I've got the trusty Stanley ready to go with the water, see how long the show takes. And we are going to get this show on the road for the podcast audience. So you're ready. I'm ready. Let's get this thing underway. And welcome into the Thursday edition of the TDN Daily podcast. Chris Schubert back with you here once again on the show. Hope everybody is having a great start, middle, and whenever you're listening to this, your Thursday. Hope your Thursday is going very well. If you're listening to this on Friday, I hope your Friday is going well. If somehow you have a time machine and you've gone back in time and you're listening to this somehow on a Wednesday, even though it hasn't been done yet, hope you're having a good Wednesday. Either way, hope you're having a great day whenever you are listening to this. We've got a fun one in store for you here today. I love it when we're able to take topics and take stories and articles that are in-house, that are from the Draft Network family, and we're able to bring them here to you on the TDN Daily podcast, and I can share my thoughts and we can expand on the conversation and get your thoughts as well. And that is exactly what we are doing today on the show. This morning, June 1st, an article dropped over on thedraftnetwork.com from one of our team members, Dan Ollinger, and the title of the story, NFL only has one foolproof team building strategy. And you can see based on the thumbnail of the YouTube video, and you can, if you go to the website and you see the picture for the story, it is, you got to have a great quarterback. If you have Patrick Mahomes, that's it. That's the strategy. That is where it starts and ends. And I thought that would be a fantastic conversation that we could have here today. And I don't want to necessarily sit here and read to you the story, right? I don't want to completely give away what Dan wrote in his piece. And I highly recommend it as a companion piece to what we are talking about here today. But there are some key things that I think Dan points out in his story that I would love for us to tackle here on the show today. And The overall message that Dan kind of talks about is that, yes, you're always going to have your San Francisco 49ers who are constantly building great winners. Yes, you're going to have teams like the Eagles that are able to build teams and be competitive with Jalen Hurts. You're going to have teams that have, like the Dallas Cowboys and the Minnesota Vikings, that they're going to constantly be in the playoffs, but they're always going to come up short. And the key point, and this is the quote that I'm going to pull from Dan's story to kind of start us off here. And in the story, he says, so much of the playoffs will once again come down to, does your team have Mahomes or not? And if not that, does your team have a guy who is almost as good as Mahomes or not? And my immediate takeaway from reading this story, and I don't think this is what Dan was getting at, but it was where my brain went when I first read the story, is would this story have been written? Would this story have been written with Patrick Mahomes as the thumbnail to today's YouTube video? Would he be the picture, the featured image on the story on the website? And would this story be written if Patrick Mahomes did not win the Super Bowl just a couple of months ago and still only had one Super Bowl to his name? Would it still be a foolproof team building strategy to just have the best quarterback in the game, the best quarterback of a generation? Which Dan kind of lays out in the story, that's how he feels about Patrick Mahomes. The Eagles were very close to winning that Super Bowl. They were in that game. In fact, they had just as much of a chance late in the fourth quarter to win that football game as the Kansas City Chiefs did. And so I asked the question somewhat rhetorically, somewhat for the live YouTube audience to get involved, because where my brain immediately went to is, would we talk about this story? Would this story be a thing? Would we frame it this way? Is that there's only one foolproof was the word, foolproof. This is the way you have to do it in the NFL. You just have to have a great quarterback. And if you don't have a great quarterback, you have to be really close. And the reason why my brain went there is, if it can on that type of margin go from being foolproof to not being foolproof based on a holding call late in the fourth quarter of a Super Bowl, I don't know how foolproof the plan is in the first place. I don't know if it is the only way that you can find success. The playoffs are a one and done environment. You will hear people talk in other sports. You will hear people talk about this in the Stanley Cup playoffs in hockey. You will hear people talk about this in the MLB playoffs to try to win a World Series. Just get in the dance. And those are multiple game series. In the Stanley Cup playoffs, it's all 7-game series. In baseball, you've got 3, 5, 7-game series. It's not just one and done. And even in those sports, people look at it from get in the dance and see what happens. Maybe you get hot. Maybe you get the hot goaltender. Maybe you get a Madison Bumgarner-esque pitching performance that carries you to a World Series championship if you're the San Francisco Giants, right? Maybe, you, like I mentioned, maybe you get the hot goalkeeper. Maybe in the NFL, you get the 2 magical runs of Eli Manning and the New York Giants. You get the runs that the Philadelphia Eagles had with Nick Foles as their starting quarterback. Joe Flacco and the Baltimore Ravens will have won a championship in recent memory. And so for me, and those championships in particular, the Eli Manning and the Joe Flacco, are, I think, from a different era than the era that we are currently in right now. And I will give that. I will grant that as part of this conversation. But to me, the fact that there are teams that are always in the mix, like Cincinnati, like Buffalo, Tampa Bay with Tom Brady, and I don't know if we would put Tom at the latter stages of his career on that pedestal with Patrick Mahomes. I don't think we would do that. And Burrow and Allen maybe fall into the bucket of they're not Mahomes, but they're close. And close enough is fine. But to me, close enough is a too undefined category to really say that the only way, the foolproof way to find success in the National Football League and to find ways to a championship and to win a championship is you got to have Patrick Mahomes. Because, oh, by the way, Patrick Mahomes had lost the Super Bowl to Tom Brady. Patrick Mahomes, going into this Super Bowl, was 1-1 in Super Bowls. So it wasn't foolproof. It wasn't, you got Patrick Mahomes, that's great, no problem. And even with a guy that's maybe not as close, I don't know if we would consider, I'll ask the chat this. Do we put Jalen Hurts in that same tier that we put Joe Burrow and Josh Allen when it comes to being close to Patrick Mahomes? I don't think we do. He's in the tier probably right behind those guys, and he's on the rise. And last year was a great, Jamie put it in the chat a little bit ago, a great glow up for Jalen Hurts to get him to this point. But again, he's not really in that tier. Bailey says here in the chat, the dominance that the 49ers had over the Packers the last few years in the playoffs argue against this. Rodgers was the league MVP across 3 seasons, but it got ended by the 49ers twice with average QB play. Goes back to the point that I'm making of the playoffs are in some ways a crapshoot. The Bengals beat this Patrick Mahomes. This Patrick Mahomes in the peak of his career to go to a Super Bowl. Now they didn't win it. The Los Angeles Rams did. Is Matt Stafford a top tier quarterback? And so to me, there are multiple ways to skin a cat. There are more than one ways to win. Yes. Does it overwhelmingly increase your chances? Does it overwhelmingly make your odds better when you have a player like Patrick Mahomes? Yes, because you're probably always going to be there. You're probably always going to have home games in the playoffs. And he is special enough to where he can win you a game if the rest of the stuff around him isn't particularly good. And he can kind of mask a lot of your problems. I would agree with that. But to say that it's foolproof, it's the only way to do it, would spit in the face of what the Rams have done in recent years. It would spit in the face of what San Francisco has been able to do. And yes, it hasn't ended in a championship. But again, we were one play away from Patrick Mahomes being 1-2 in Super Bowls. So if it's on that thin of a margin that we're going to make this foolproof, then I think we can say that the 49ers are just as close with the success that they've had in the playoffs with below average quarterback play. Jamie says foolproof doesn't mean only. Foolproof means it works all the time, though. Foolproof means in more cases than not, it's going to work. It's overwhelmingly the only way that you can do it. And so for me, that's kind of the pushback that I would have, is that to me, foolproof means every single year, every single time that the Kansas City Chiefs are in the playoffs, they should be going to a Super Bowl because they have Patrick Mahomes. And again, I just don't know if I buy that. I think there are multiple ways that you can do this. I think you can team build in a way that the Philadelphia Eagles have had, where they've built in the trenches. They've built a great offensive line. They've built a great defensive line. I think you can team build and find success the way the San Francisco 49ers have, in which they build a team and the quarterback play maybe isn't necessarily so great, although they tried to get their long-term answer at quarterback with Trey Lance. And so, again, I'm not trying to diminish the conversation here, and I'm not trying to diminish the fact that overwhelmingly having Patrick Mahomes is going to put you in a better situation. And I would agree with that. But I think we have recent examples of teams that have done it in a different way that make me think that there's not just one way to do this. The 49ers have done it differently. The Rams have done it differently. The Bengals have done it differently. Those are just 3 teams that have made it to the Super Bowl in recent years and made it to the Super Bowl. And I think that's good enough to be able to warrant a team-building conversation and to be in the mix in multiple years. They've done it differently than the Kansas City Chiefs. And if your tiebreaker is going to be the Super Bowl championships, I mean, I can't argue with that. Math is math. Patrick Mahomes has 2, right? Matt Stafford and the Rams only have 1. Joe Burrow doesn't have any. Buffalo doesn't have any, and I can't argue with that. If that's the argument you want to make, you want to come at me with Super Bowl championships, that's fine. I just think that's a very fine line to walk when discussing team building. I think there are multiple ways to be successful when it comes to team building and have long-term success, and at the end of the day, not have championships. Bailey says, I think we are also not accounting for Andy Reid here. If you put Mahomes with that New England OC situation last year, he would still be incredible, but not getting a Super Bowl. Yeah, and that's part of it too. And so maybe there's a disagreement here on what we define as foolproof. You know what? Let's consult the internet. What does the internet say foolproof is? We'll do a quick little Google search here to see if we're playing this accordingly. So foolproof. So simple, plain, or reliable as to leave no opportunity for error, misuse, or failure. I don't think it's the only foolproof way to get it done. I just don't. I don't think it's the simple, plain, or reliable way. The 49ers have been incredibly reliable. Has it meant a championship? No. But they've been incredibly reliable. And if they just had average quarterback play, consistently enough, you don't think they're hosting a championship? I think they are. So to me, it's not the binary choice of have a great quarterback and you're guaranteed success. You're guaranteed that you're going to have all of this, glitz and glamour, and you're going to just have the red carpet rolled out for you for a Super Bowl. I think there are other ways to get this done. Now, again, does the Chiefs having the head coach quarterback combo that they have of Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes put them at a significant advantage in comparison to other teams? 100%. I would agree entirely with that. That going into every single season, Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs should be considered the Super Bowl favorites because he's Patrick freaking Mahomes and they've got Andy Reid as their coach. I am not discounting that, but that doesn't mean other teams can't get it done. And I see Aaron Rodgers being brought up a bunch in the chat as a guy who's been a top quarterback over the last couple of years and would fall into the bucket that Dan points out in the article of if you don't have Mahomes or not, do you have a guy who is almost as good as Mahomes or not? Is Aaron Rodgers not as good as Mahomes or not during the year where he won back-to-back MVPs? I only got one. I love Jamie being the defender of the story here. I love this. Jamie says it's the only foolproof way because there isn't another foolproof way. I mean, I guess at that point we're arguing semantics, right? And I don't want to wade too much into the semantics waters here, right? I want to discuss, are there other ways to team build that can find you success and find you championships? And I think we have examples of recent memory where that is the case. And so that's really the conversation that I want to have here. And I just disagree with the idea that the only way to do it is to do it the way the Chiefs did it. That I don't agree with. So for me, I again, the 49ers are a great example. I mean, I think the Rams are a great example. The Rams don't have a quarterback that was close to. I mean, I know he played great that year, but he wasn't close to Stafford. And Jamie says, to be fair, the semantics is the point of the article, not that it's the only way to be successful ever. I mean, fair. I understand that that's the point of the story, but I think there's a difference, and the story kind of points out, Dallas and Minnesota having living this experience with Prescott and Kirk Cousins. But the next comment was, if your quarterback can't even be mentioned in the same stratosphere as the NFL's current king and Mahomes, then what chance do you really have at accomplishing your ultimate goal? And I just don't agree with the fact that it boils down to that. I just don't fundamentally agree. And trust me, not a Dak Prescott or Kirk Cousins defender sitting here on the show today. I just don't necessarily agree that you have to be mentioned in that same stratosphere as Mahomes to find success. I just don't think that's the case. And again, it's not like the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes are walking to every single Super Bowl since Mahomes has gotten there. And so that just on its own kind of counteracts what we're talking about. I love the conversation. This has been a ton of fun. But again, I think there are multiple ways to skin a cat here. And again, Tate said it in the chat. Is it fair to say you have to have a top 3 to 5 quarterback on a run or a top O-line, D-line combo? I think that's part of it, right? I think you see teams kind of delve into the top O-line, D-line combo. Certainly the Philadelphia Eagles have. The San Francisco 49ers have. I'm trying to think of other teams that have kind of developed their strategy that way. And then there are other teams that have gone on runs with a top 3 to 5 quarterback option, right? Like the Cincinnati Bengals are a great example. They went to a Super Bowl. Now, again, they didn't win. And so if that's the argument of just winning Super Bowls, then yes, then Patrick Mahomes got 2. And that's going to stand the test of time right now over everybody. Does anybody else active have more than 2 or more than 1? And is there an obvious answer that I'm completely missing off the top of my head? Is there a current active quarterback that has more than 2 Super Bowls currently? Rodgers only has 1. I'm trying to think of any other quarterback that's currently active that could have multiple championships. Russ, how many does Russ have? Does Russ have 2? Russ has got 2. Russ has got 1. Sam with the Raiders quarterback Tom Brady. Get out of here with that, Sam. Get out of here with that. Don't start. Russ has 1. So Russ has 1. Trying to think of any other quarterbacks that could potentially. Stafford's got 1. Try to go through the divisions very quickly in my head. I don't think of any other quarterback that's got more than Mahomes or more than 1. So just on that alone, yes, you win the argument. Like that's the way to do it because he's got 2 and everybody else has got 1. So you win. Like great. I concede. Jamie says since the Chiefs took over as the start, I have no idea what you mean by this, but I think I understand the point. AFC Championship game, Super Bowl win, Super Bowl loss, AFC Championship game, Super Bowl win. Yes, and Jamie, their success is in those 2 Super Bowls, right? That's what defines their success, the Super Bowl loss. But the San Francisco 49ers, let's pull up the San Francisco apologies for the delay here as I look up the San Francisco 49ers franchise history to see what they have done in recent memory, just to kind of compare. In recent memory in the last 4 years, 2 conference championship berths and a loss, and then they went to the Super Bowl and lost. Jamie says, outside of the 49ers, who is a current Super Bowl contender without an elite quarterback? Now that's a fun question. Who is a current Super Bowl contender without an elite quarterback? Do we define Jalen Hurts as elite? Because then it would be the Philadelphia Eagles. That would be the answer for me. If you define Jalen Hurts as elite after last season, then okay, then we do. Okay. So then they wouldn't count. We consider Josh Allen elite. We consider Joe Burrow elite. I'm trying to think if there's another team that we consider. We've already mentioned the 49ers, right? It's outside. Jamie's asking for outside of the 49ers. Is there a team that we would consider a Super Bowl contender, who's a current Super Bowl contender that doesn't have an elite quarterback? And I mean, again, any other team that you would put on the peripheral, you would put on the fringe, like the Chargers, Justin Herbert, right? You're right. And like Jamie's talking like top contenders. Yeah, and I would agree, Jamie, that outside of the 49ers, I don't know if there's necessarily another team that doesn't have an elite quarterback. But I think you look at teams like Miami. I think you look at teams like, we mentioned the Chargers as potential Super Bowl contenders in the AFC that don't have that maybe are on the fringe, and Miami doesn't have an elite quarterback in Tua. Played pretty well. No, hashtag our Lions are not a Super Bowl contender. I'm sorry. The Cowboys? Do we consider the Cowboys like top tier Super Bowl contenders? That'd be news to me. I know they have the 6th best odds, but that's because there's a Cowboys tax when it comes to those odds. So I don't really know that I agree with that. So the Cowboys are not a team that I would mention. So this has been a lot of fun. I've really appreciated the conversation. I wasn't sure how this would get taken. I'm incredibly encouraged as to the debate and conversation that we've had about this. But I just look at other teams who have done it differently than the way Kansas City has, that maybe have not. Cowboys are fun for the both. Are they contenders? And the is that good combo? Agreed 100%. You have 2 camps there. I think that there are other ways that teams can find success. And again, I fully admit that if you just point to the fact that Mahomes has 2 Super Bowls and nobody else has more than 1, then you win the argument. But I think when we look at body of work, there are other teams that have found levels of success similar to the Kansas City Chiefs that have not built the same way that they have. So, and that would be the argument. Are there a number of examples? Are there 6 to 10 teams that I can point to? No, it's a handful. It's 2 or 3, right? It's 2 or 3 that you can point to and say that they're kind of doing things a little bit differently. But again, I think there's some nuance here that I thought was important to kind of have a discussion about here today on the show. That is going to do it for us here on the podcast version of the show. We will continue this conversation here in the post show. We've got wide receiver room rankings tomorrow on the show, 1 through 32. We're going to go through all that, a big meaty episode to close out the week. So that is what we've got to look forward to. If you listen to us in the podcast feed, please rate, review, subscribe to the podcast. We greatly appreciate all 3 of those things. If you've done all 3 of those things, please share the show with a friend, coworker, family member, loved one, somebody you think would enjoy this conversation. Join us over on the YouTube side of things, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday. You got the pre-show, the recording of the show, and then the post-show, and the chat is going off already. So the post-show should be a lot of fun. You can also catch us on demand. If you missed the live version of the show and you want to catch up on the video versions of the show, you can do so on the Draft Network YouTube channel underneath the live tab. That is going to do it for us here on the Thursday edition of the show. Hope everybody has a great rest of their Thursday. Talk to y'all tomorrow. So what's going on here in the chat? Hello, welcome to the pre-show. You guys devolved into a Dak conversation, and it didn't really weave into what we were talking about on the show. So I figured I would save that for the post-show, and we can continue the show here. Matt says, Dak is good. Yes, they are contenders, but he isn't elite. The team is good, but it lets itself down so often. I don't know. Yeah, I mean Dak's fine. Dak's fine. I don't know if they're contenders. They're the second best team in their division. That's good enough to make the playoffs in the NFC, but I think they're behind the Eagles. I think the wide openness of the NFC kind of helps, but I don't really think they're Super Bowl. I don't think they're going to win the Super Bowl. The Cowboys and Lions have nice rosters. I think the Cowboys are a bit ahead. Both have QBs with question marks and have not proven it in the postseason. I mean, Bailey, I think it's a little unfair to say that they haven't proved. I mean, I guess your argument is like the Lions haven't gotten there, so we don't know what they'll be like when they get there. But like, I think there's a difference between that question and the question of the way the Cowboys have let their fan base and let their team down, let themselves down in the postseason. I think there are two very different postseason conversations with those two teams, and so boiling it down to they have not proven it in the postseason. I think that term takes on different meanings for both teams. For the Lions, it's because this current group hasn't gotten there with this new vision. But you do have a Super Bowl quarterback in Jared Goff, so he's been to a Super Bowl. And I think they're different. Janelle says, thank you for not talking about the Rodgers article in The Athletic. I thought the Packers would be done with the Rodgers drama now that he's a Jet. I mean, I saw the story, but I didn't think, I mean, it's not worth mentioning here on this show. Tate says, Titans were underwhelming in the end, but had a very few years where they were very competitive with a very unique philosophy. Yeah, and I think there's a difference between, like, there are one-offs that happen. Like the Jags making their run to the AFC Championship game, right? Like, those are one-offs that I don't think are in the spirit of the conversation. The 49ers are in the spirit of the conversation. The Eagles are in the spirit of the conversation. The years where the Packers had Rodgers and didn't win another Super Bowl, that's in the spirit of the conversation. I think like the Jags making a run. I think the Titans short burst is kind of not in the spirit of the article and in the conversation. And hopefully I did the article proud. I hope Dan's not too mad at me for kind of fighting him on the article a little bit. I love the story. I love the conversation. And it's not that I really totally disagree. I just think there's a little more nuance that I wanted to kind of explore over, 20 or so minutes on the podcast today. Titans are so hard carried by coaching. I have never considered them a true contender. Again, there are one-offs that I don't know if they necessarily should count in this nuance. Like the Rams, you could consider them a one-off. Bailey says, I do think you have to have an elite offense to get there in the current NFL clients. The Lions, 49ers, and other proved you don't need an elite quarterback for that, though. O-line and play calling. Yeah, and I think that there's another piece of the nuance, right? You have to have an elite offense. I don't know if you have to have an elite quarterback. Jamie, I think the Lions are the third or fourth best team in the NFC. To be a top contender in my mind, which is subjective, you have to be top two, and if not top two, you have to have an elite QB. I'd agree with that. That you either have to be top two overall in your conference, and then if you're not, if you're third or fourth, then you just need to have an elite QB that you can kind of wiggle your way out of a tough situation. Philly, San Francisco, KC, Cincinnati, Buffalo would be my tier one, and I'm a little concerned about even having Buffalo there right now. I'd agree with that. But of that group, this is fun. Like, of that group, Philly did it differently than Kansas City. San Francisco did it differently than Kansas City. Cincinnati, in some ways, kind of did it differently than Kansas City. Like, there's some nuance there. Tate says, can the Falcons replicate the Titans' success with 1 to 2 more good drafts? Is that a worthy team-building philosophy? Can the Falcons replicate the Titans' success with 1 to 2 more good drafts? Is that a worthy team-building philosophy? So, Tate, are you asking if they follow the similar route of having a Ryan Tannehill-esque quarterback and leaning in towards running the football with Bijan and Tyler Algier and Cordarrelle Patterson and having kind of some decent playmakers? They've got Kyle Pitts and Drake London, more than decent playmakers, but that kind of being the core of what their roster is and kind of building that way. Because, like, I think, I'm skeptical of it. I'm skeptical of it finding success. And not because I don't think they can win games. It's just they've got to find their Ryan Tannehill. Do we think Desmond Ridder can be Ryan Tannehill? I think the question's still out on that entering year 2 for him. And so if he's not at the end of the year, they either have to find their Ryan Tannehill or in the next draft they're going to draft a QB, and so then they're not going to be the Titans, right? They're not going to follow that mantra, that mentality. And so for me, it's hard to say that they'll replicate it because they've got to find their Ryan Tannehill. They've got to find their version of that and then lean all in. They're kind of building this without that piece in place. And then maybe they'll try to find it, or they'll hope Desmond Ridder can be that piece. But if he's not, who are they going to go out and get that's going to be that player for them? I don't know. Maybe they think Taylor Heineke can be that. I have no idea. I'm skeptical of that. Falcons need to quickly figure out if they are fine at QB. Yeah, they just got to find out if Desmond Ridder can play. Bo Nix, Falcons, great. Jamie calling his shot like in June for the 2024 NFL draft that the Falcons are going to get Bo Nix. Bailey, can I answer this question? You tagged Jamie in it, but can I answer the question of which team outside of the top 5 that he mentioned has the best O-line, D-line combo? Am I allowed to weigh in on this? I'm going to, even if you say no, because it's my show, but I just thought at least I'd politely. Okay, thank you. So we can't count Philly, San Francisco, Kansas City, Cincinnati, and Buffalo. All those teams are out. I have the schedule over here on the second screen. So we can't include any of those teams. Do we like Cleveland's O-line, D-line? We like Cleveland's O-line, D-line. Do we like the Giants O-line, D-line? I'm just mentioning teams. I'm not saying that we're gonna rank them completely. I'm just throwing teams out there that could suffice. The Giants are a pretty good one. I mean, the Lions O-line, D-line's pretty good. Evan Neal has to step up. He was fine last year. He was fine. Let's look at teams that have good offense. I can't. Why? Why can't I just sort the depth charts by just old linemen? I gotta separate it by tackles. It's not gonna work. Evan Neal was awful, Chris. I didn't think he was. I didn't think he was terrible. He was just fine. Andrew Thomas played really well last year. They added John Michael Schmitz. Lions and Browns are best examples. Dallas and Detroit have an argument. We could throw Dallas in there as well. Yeah, I thought Neal ended the year pretty well. I thought Neal ended the year pretty solidly. Andrew Thomas has emerged very well. Of course, Jamie, we would include Micah Parsons in that conversation. Because I think when you're doing the O-line, D-line conversation, you're not just talking about interior defensive linemen, you're talking about edge rushers, and that's what they use Micah Parsons as. Yeah, Thomas was great. Andrew Thomas was great. And I they've got John Michael Schmitz for next year. I thought Evan Neal finished the year well, and I think he could parlay that into a pretty good year this year. I mean, he needs to live up to the play, to his scouting report and to the potential. He did not in year one, but I thought he finished the year strong. Yeah, if they can get a similar glow up from him in year 2, then they're going to be in pretty good shape along the offensive line. They've got the interior and they've got their 2 pillars in their tackle spots. Is there any other team that we want to mention here? Is there any other team that wants to jump in here? We mentioned it was a rough start. Yeah, it didn't go like there were I can remember because I still have got friends there, and so I'll get the clips of like the local talk radio there in New York, and there were some conversations of like, oof, this was a bad pick, this didn't work out very well, this wasn't good. And then by the time the year was over, everyone was like, oh, it was kind of a little bit overblown because he was fine towards the end of the year. But yes, it was a rough start. I won't disagree there. But are there any other teams that we want to throw in the mix here? Are there any other teams for an O-line, D-line combo? We mentioned the Browns. Dallas has been nominated. Detroit has been nominated. Is there anybody outside of those 3 teams that we want to mention that aren't a contender? Can I mean, the Jets don't really have they don't have a great offensive line. I think they have a good defensive line. They have like pieces on the offensive line. They've got like 2.5 pieces that I like on their offensive line. I like Tippmann and Elijah Vera Tucker, and that's where it ends. Jamie, that's what I just said. I just said they've got the D-line. They don't have the O-line. I just said it. Part of doing the TDN Daily podcast is I can't just keep my thoughts in my head. I have to share them. And so I was sharing the thought process that I looked at the Jets logo and I said, let's talk this out loud. And I was like, oh, the D-line's pretty good, but that O-line's kind of suspect. And I then just shared the thoughts out loud. That's the point of the show, specifically in the post show. It's not even on the actual show. This is the post show. I'm allowed to do this. For projecting ahead to 2023, I low-key like the Jags. Don't tell Sam Teets that. Hopefully Sam Teets isn't in here. Well, I hope he isn't here because, I want him to be part of the show, but I hope he's not in here because we're going to we're going to take just a left turn, and the show is going to be all about the Jags, the remainder. We are going to it's going to be very bad. Yep, there it is. I just knew it. I just knew it was going to happen. You mention the Jags in any positive light, and Sam Teets gets a notification on his phone, and he comes running back to the keyboard, comes running back to have the conversation about the Jaguars, because this guy is totally out on the Jags in 2023. Guy could not be more out on them in 2023. So Sam, the floor is yours, my guy. You can just put in the chat what you want to say, and I'll read it out loud. But I knew this was going to happen. Bailey mentions, and there's Heldy. Yep, there we go. We're just completely off the rails here. Bailey says the Packers always have had an annoyingly good O-line, and they have Gary, Clark, and now Wyatt and Van Ness on the D-line. Yeah, they're a good squad from that perspective. Tate asks, can you think of an example of a top team in recent memory with elite skill players but bad QB and trench play? Can you think of an example of a top team in recent memory with elite skill players but bad QB and trench play? The problem is I can think of a lot of bad QB play, but I'm also trying to figure out the trench play side of this. Sam, we don't talk about the Broncos game. We take that tape and we dig the hole in the ground and we throw that tape in there and we bury it and we never look at it again because we did a breakdown. Sam, I think you were there for the breakdown. We did a film study in the TDN Premium Discord on that game because I think we were doing a Trevor breakdown, and it was not fun. Well, it was fun because we were having good conversation and we were deep diving and we were learning. So I don't want to say it wasn't fun in that regard. There were some film studies that were not fun because the play wasn't very good, but we were learning. But yeah, no, it was not good for Trevor Lawrence. Tate says, I feel like you need QB or trench dogs. Yeah, I mean, you're gonna need one of those two things, because if you have good trench play, you can run the football effectively, and then you can stop the other team from running, and you can get after the quarterback. And that's a great equalizer, right? That's running the football allows you to control the tempo. It allows you to maybe keep the other team off the field. That's the way you equalize against a team like Patrick Mahomes. You just kind of keep him on the sideline a little bit. That's kind of what some teams try to employ against him. And then you need to be able to get after him, right? It's what Tampa did so well in the Super Bowl against them, right? The way that they were able to win that game is they got after Patrick Mahomes. He didn't have a great offensive line, and so they got after him and they created pressure. Bailey says, I remember watching TCU tape to watch Quentin Johnson. He go, dude, that was the worst one of the year. And it wasn't Quentin's fault. They just didn't throw to him. We picked a game that they didn't. We were like, oh, let's pick this game. It's against a pretty decent team. Or actually, I think we saw the stat line and we were like, what happened here? And then we looked at it. What about the Falcons as well? They've had heavy investments. Matthews, Bergeron, Damon, Lindstrom, McGarry. Yeah, that's a pretty good offensive line. I still think the defensive line is a work in progress for the Atlanta Falcons. Although they invested a ton this offseason, did they not? Yeah, Calais Campbell they brought in, Onyemata they brought in. Yeah, and they brought in a bunch of players. Let's look at their current depth chart defensively. I haven't looked at it in a little bit. Yeah, Onyemata, Campbell, Grady Jarrett, Bud Dupree. Their linebacking core is pretty good. They got Troy Anderson, who played pretty well last year. Their starting offensive line: Jake Matthews at left tackle, Matthew Bergeron at left guard, Drew Dalman at center, Chris Lindstrom, Caleb McGarry. I mean, that's a pretty good group. You got 3 first-round picks along that group in Lindstrom, McGarry, and Jake Matthews. A high second-round pick in Matthew Bergeron that people are really high on, sliding him inside. Yeah, they've got some group, a good group there. Yeah, I mean, it's gonna come down to quarterback play from them, because I think they've got pieces. I mean, Bijan and Tyler Algier was where did we put them? We put them top 10 yesterday. We made so many changes that I forget officially where they ended up, but I think they were like 8th or 9th when it was all said and done. Yeah, they were 9th in our running back room rankings from a year ago. So you've got a 9th ranked running back room, I haven't finished the wide receiver rankings yet. I'm going to go through it a little bit later today, so I don't know where they rank in that regard. But their quarterback room was 25th on our board. So it's going to come down to, I mean, they've got Drake London. Now, see, here's the problem. Kyle Pitts isn't going to count for the wide receiver part of it. He's going to count for the tight end conversation, but he's not going to count for tomorrow's wide receiver conversation. So after Drake London, a little bit of a question mark with Matt Collins and Scotty Miller and Frank Darby and Penny Hart and Kaderil Hodge. Bailey, if you believe Dan's article, is there not an argument that 28 teams should be tanking for Caleb and maybe on the off chance they are good? If you don't have Mahomes, Burrow, and Allen, what's the point? And yeah, I mean, and again, the quote from the story that I pulled out is that, like, you either have Mahomes or you have somebody that's close to Mahomes, right? And those are the two buckets. And truly, if we looked at it through that lens, there are 6 or 7 teams that fit that bucket that either they have Mahomes, they're the Kansas City Chiefs, or they are a team that has somebody that can compete with Mahomes. And so to me, I don't know. I don't agree with that. And so that was kind of the pushback. But Bailey, I think that's a very extreme way to take the story. And I understand the point that if you don't have one of those teams, if you don't have one of those quarterbacks, then aren't you then, in this mindset, that's the foolproof way to do it, then just tank. And I just don't, teams are never going to do that. They're going to think that if they build a very, very competitive roster, that they are the team that can make the run. Bringing a great QB into a great roster by going all in when ready. Yep. That's what my team's trying to do. Well, they did. They went and got the quarterback. They're just hoping it pans out. Andrew Luck was screwed by his bad roster. Yeah. Yeah, no, and Bailey, that's the fun part, right? Because I think if you take the takeaway from the article and you go to that extreme, like you said, it's a pretty scary look for the National Football League, right? And so because teams don't do that, it makes you think that, like, they clearly don't think that. They clearly don't think you have to have Mahomes or somebody close to Mahomes. You always want it. It's always better to have. But do you think Kyle Shanahan's going into this year thinking, poor us, can't win a Super Bowl this year? You think Dan Campbell and the Detroit Lions are going into the season like, poor us, we can't, we're not going to be able to win because we got Jared Goff. That's just not how it's happening. If you want to talk about great trench play, let's look at the Bears D-line, that ferocious group that is going to keep games as low-scoring slugfest, according to Chris. It's true. He ain't going into the season with any rings either. That's true. That is a true point, Jamie. That is true. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna look at this group that's gonna try to hold teams to 16 points a game. DeMarcus Walker, Andrew Billings, Justin Jones, Zach Pickens, Gervon Dexter, Trevis Gibson, Dominique Rod. I'm sorry, Bill. I know you're trying. I can't get excited about this group. Watson, Mahomes, Herbert, Lamar. There are so many examples of QBs not going first in their draft but being elite. Yeah. I mean, Jalen Hurts, the Philadelphia Eagles went to the Super Bowl. Earlier, my friend Jamie Eisner said we have to consider him in the elite group. Was a second-round selection. Yeah, Matt, they're gonna extend Jared Goff for sure. I really think Jared Goff's getting extended. I don't think there's any other way. Although I do think they will sign 2 of Leonard Floyd, Justin Houston, and Yannick Ngakoue. That's a bold prediction. We've got that. That's it's folks. Happy June 1st. We might get some roster moves today. We might start seeing some big time signings here. Happy June 1st to all who celebrate. Let's see. Has anything happened already today? I haven't even. I don't know why I looked up at my computer screen just now and realized it was June 1st, even though I knew it was June 1st. Take. I like the Eagles. Healthy. Thanks for that take. Thanks for that take. I really, really appreciate it. Nothing. No news yet. Probably have that to react to tomorrow as well. But that is going to do it for us here on this edition of the show here in the post show. I appreciate everybody here making the show part of the day, being a part of what has been a very, very fun conversation. Heldy says, sorry, didn't mean to scorch the earth today. Heldy, it's okay. We had a great conversation. We had a lot of fun. We had a great time. That's what this is about. Wide receiver rooms tomorrow, Bailey. Yes, for those of you that are in here, wide receiver room rankings tomorrow. I've got 31 teams to fill in on the list. I know team number 1. I shared it yesterday on the show. Or it was in the show or it was in the post show. I know I shared it at some point during the show yesterday. And so we've got those tomorrow, 32 teams. We've got 31 left to rank. I already have my number 1 team ready to go. So we've got that tomorrow to close out the week. And so we're looking forward to closing out the week in style with that. So it should be a lot of fun to see the debate and see where everybody kind of feels on that. And I think the thing I enjoy the most about it is I get to share my initial thoughts. I get to share my initial thought process and how I got to the list. And then there's always somebody in the chat that brings up a great conversation that will allow us to then shift one team, and then there's a domino that comes with that. And I love that. I love that we can get into the weeds and have those conversations, and that's what those shows are all about. So I appreciate everybody being here. Appreciate everybody making this show a part of their day. Hope everybody has a great rest of their Thursday. We'll talk to y'all tomorrow.